Right, so I watched some of the summary videos from Shadow of the Erdtree's preview event. Don't worry, no spoilers. But I suddenly found myself thinking, fuck, I really need a claw build for this DLC. So hey guys, Thingfishy here, and welcome to what's probably the final build guide in base game Elden Ring. Today, I'll show you my take on a claw build, combining them with a whole lot of buff stacking for a setup that absolutely shreds bosses. We'll do the setup first, then I'll talk you through the nerdy bit. To get started, follow my standard setup guide to grab all the early upgrades and kill the Knight's Cavalry and Grail for our runes and grab these levels. You have to have at least 50k remaining. You may want to grab the Smithing Bell Bearing 1 from the Raya Lucaria Crystal Tunnels before you do this. Now to the Divine Tower in Caelid to grab the Newman's Rune for later. Then down into the High Road Cave in Limgrave to grab the Blue Dancer Charm. Now the setup for this build isn't ideal. I always try to avoid my guides having points of failure, but it's just not possible on this one if you want everything right at the start. So to make failure as unlikely as possible, we need a super strong setup weapon. So kill the Bloodhound Knight in Limgrave for Old Reliable. Now to Volcano Manor. We're not actually heading in. We're here to grab one of our weapons for the run. From the Prison Town Church Grace, head into the next room to kill the Lesser Knight for Bloodhound Claws. Now for the tricky bit. Head to the Abandoned Cave in Caelid. Do yourself a favour here and make a save file, because while this bit isn't awful, we can't afford to lose these runes. Apply Bloodhound Step to your dagger and scooch through the first pull. Then wait for the rot to subside before you continue on. Run through the rest of the cave until you get to these rats and quit out just after. In the next room, we're going to Bloodhound Step through the first little pull and up the old abductors to grab our second weapon before quitting out again. Now it's a straight shot to the boss room. Just do not get rotted. And unfortunately, to escape this cave, we do have to kill the boss. Happily, 2 full weapon arcs with Bloodhound's Fang does the trick. This also gives us access to the Golden Scarab, which of course I instantly forgot about and never used again, but you can switch to it after every fight in the run for a shit ton more runes and levels. Back to the round table to buy all the smithing stones we need to level up our weapons. I took the Venomous Fang to +16 and left the claws at +12. Now for our Ash of War. Head to Bogart at the Ball Prawn Shack. And I'm so used to killing him at low level that I used an unupgraded flail instead of the +12 and +16 weapons I had just spent an hour getting. For our last bit of setup, to the Isolated Merchant in South Weeping to grab the Lost Ashes of War, and duplicate Braggart's Roar at the round table. So let's do a quick little damage test. So let's talk about Braggart's Roar. This Ash of War gives a 10% boost to damage and defense, boosts your stamina recovery by 20%, and gives you a unique two-handed moveset on whatever weapon you're using. Now the obvious way of using this Ash of War is sticking it on a big old bonk and using those unique R2 attacks which you can buff with the raw medallion. It's pretty damn good. But today, we're doing something a little different. Because by using Braggart's Raw on 2 separate weapons, you can stack the damage, defense, and stamina regen buffs. So for this power stance combo, which will be the staple of this run, without any buffs, fully recovering your stamina takes 72 frames. With Braggart's Raw on one weapon, that goes down to 64. But by stacking that on both weapons, it comes down to 54, along with stacked damage. With the stamina recovery of Flame Grant Me Strength, that becomes 42, and if you wanted to, by using the Green Burst here, you can bring that down to 32 frames, less than half the original value, although you will sacrifice damage doing this. So if you take that stacked damage and the stack boost to our recovery speed and pair it with a build that is all about attack spamming, shenanigans will ensue. Let's go grab the Green Burst here from the avatar in Northwest Caelid. Alternatively, you could just use the Green Spilged here for a flat stamina boost, as to be honest, the stacked Braggart's Raw boost is kinda all you'll ever need on its own. So I'll let this Godric fight play out and just keep an eye on my stamina bar throughout it. For Radahn, I used the strength and dex physics, as I was a little worried about damage, but I really shouldn't have been. With Radahn dead, we can head down into Nokron to the Night's Sacred Ground to grab the Black Wet Blade. With it, I infused Bloodhound's Claws with Occult and the Venomous Fang with Bleed so I could keep that poison damage. For our second talisman, I went down into the Stillwater Cave to grab the Winged Sword. Then for the third, to the Lux Ruins for the Ritual Sword talisman. And as I was pretty shocked at how strong this build was so far, the question I had was, how strong is it? And that question was answered pretty quickly, when I got Mohg to 30% health on my very first attempt. And after grabbing the Purifying Tear from Eleonora, so yeah, this build is fairly strong. You pretty much need to do a hitless Mohg at this level though, so I won't use these runes. Now for the Tree Sentinel, and this is about as comfy as this fight gets. The stamina recovery of this build means you just never have to worry about stamina at all. I left the Purifying Tear on deliberately, obviously, so I could see my character more clearly. On the way through Lanedale, bully the Avatar for that extra Lord's Rune. Now for Godfrey. And you might think an Arcane status effect build would be a bit of a nightmare for this, but the damage is still pretty decent. And this is one of the only builds I've ever made in the game where I just haven't had to worry about my stamina on Godfrey. And now it's time for the single worst part of doing any bleed build. Head down into the Lanedale catacombs to get lost for a bit, and open up the door to Blood Gideon. Before you go in, head back to the merchant in Northwest Caelid to buy the Beast Repellent Torch. We don't have the stats to wield it, but the Beast Repelling passive still works fine. And here we fucking go. Once your new controller's been delivered, head back up top to a good boss. I'm just going to let this one play. Ride to the Zamor ruins and down into the cellar for the Smithing Bell 3. Bait the golem at the Freezing Lake Grace to hit the statue for some 7s, then grab the ones on the hill next to the first church before heading back to the round table to upgrade your weapons. I took the claws to +20 and the fang to +16. Now before we head to Farum, go back to the Stranded Graveyard and grab a seal. As we're not using our physic for anything too important in this run, I figured it would be nice to have Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. So I grabbed some extra Sombers for a +9 Dragon Communion seal. Time for Duo, and this build absolutely deletes them for a very easy 2-cycle. Head back to the round table and level up your claws to max. For Beast and Malekith, you need to be wary of the range of the claws. Like the Iron Balls and Star Fists, they can completely miss both bosses very easily. So hit Beast's back or sides and unlock your camera when you're hitting Malekith's legs. Now I know what you're thinking. What is the point in having a +9 Dragon Communion seal just to cast Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength? And there's a very simple answer to that. I fought Gideon in my last video, and I'm not fucking doing it again. Now, this build would shred through Godfrey and Hoaraloo just fine. But if you want the style points, attack Godfrey with your standard L1s. But at any point that suits, throw in a standard R2 to build just enough posture damage. So pure Arcane bleed build for Radagon. Sounds like a nightmare, but in reality it's almost scripted. And even on Elden Beast, this build chunks damage, and that stamina regen means that you can punish every single opportunity. And it's the same story with Plassie. The claws are fast enough to punish every single move, and the passive poison is nice. And if you want to completely embarrass him, run to the edge of the arena just before the laser beams to get a punish window big enough to end the fight. For Nile, kill the summons and get his health bar down to 80%. The big tornado attack is almost all you need. And finally, to Erdtree. I'll be honest, for the first 30 seconds of this Loretta fight, I thought I was going to be here for a while. And then she stood still for a few seconds. Honestly, I don't know. It's been a while since my last Bleed Daggers run, so maybe I'm just not used to how good Bleed is. But this seemed like a crazy amount of damage to do in a single punish, and one more greedy hit would have killed her here. And finally, for Melania. And if you thought I was about to complete a whole run without parrying anything, maybe one day, but not today. I used Bloodhound's Claws for this fight, which weren't even maxed out. But still, the damage you can rack up in a single punish made for a very easy Melania. And that's it. A very silly way of making a buff stacking claws build. It's less than 2 weeks until Shadow of the Erdtree. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see these sorts of shenanigans in the DLC, subscribe to the channel for more. As always, thanks for watching. See you soon.